Here we are, episode number 6 of the Create With Us podcast. I'm here with Kristen Olsen. Kristen, how are you doing today?
I'm good. Excited to be here.
Right on. And we are actually going to dive into a few things today. So you are a marketing and branding strategist, specifically in the fitness agency, right?
Yes.
And you got KO Alliance with that. And then the second thing, and this interests us because we're on episode 6 here with the podcast, you have Turmeric and Tequila, your very own podcast episode. You're over 70 episodes now, aren't you?
Yeah, we're actually almost, I think we come out every Wednesday, and I think tomorrow is 87. So we're rounding close to 100.
Wow, that's amazing. And that's been an incredible experience for you. We're going to get into that in a little bit. And then lastly, you are a super competitive CrossFit athlete with some accolades and awards to boost, right?
Yeah, we're in it. We're not competing anymore, but yes, was in it for just about 10 years.
Wow, that's really cool. So today, we always cover marketing and the entrepreneurial journey. And what we hope our listeners to get out of this is how to build an authentic brand, how we're moving away from corporate cookie cutter brands, and even small businesses to medium businesses can find their voice, get their mission out there, and really connect with people a lot better. With all the noise out there, isn't authenticity super important these days?
Absolutely. And we talk about, authenticity, as we said kind of before we got on live, is become a buzzword like influencer. So it's getting overly used. However, from my perspective, it's still obviously deeply important. And getting back to what's real. And I think that's so important because the consumer is savvier than ever. But when I say consumer, I mean it's somebody that could be, a client or an audience member on social media or whatever. We live in a world where information is accessible. So that authenticity piece is more critical than ever because people, if you're not telling the truth, people will find it. But it should come from your heart space and wanting to tell the truth. So, you can connect with the consumer in that more authentic space.
For sure. And as owner of Create Studios, our web and digital marketing agency, I've found that kind of finding your brand or your voice is quite a process because really an organization is an ethereal thing, right? And to really tap into the heart of that takes a bit of work. And with KO Alliance, which I'm assuming is Kristen Olsen, your name, how do you help brands and specifically in the fitness industry tap into that? And give us an overview of KO Alliance so we have some context of who you are and what you do.
Sure. So long and short, it kind of came out of my own personal experience being a professional in the business world and then being on the competitive athletic side. And this is right. I played lacrosse in college and people didn't really know how to activate around lacrosse. What was going on was still kind of up and coming. This is before social media really was the thing. And then CrossFit started to take off. And it was kind of the same thing. We had like these cult-like, and I say that with love, followings. And it's a marketer's dream where both lacrosse and CrossFit, all of us buy everything in it. If it's, new pairs of shoes or tape or chalk or whatever, there's always kind of like an accessory or a consumer packaged good or something. But we didn't really know how, companies didn't know how to tap into athletes. Athletes didn't know how to tap into companies. And we didn't know how to build these mutually beneficial relationships. So from my experience in the beginning, I had worked I would have had, an entrepreneurial mindset. I had a lacrosse business first and learned creative strategy there, and then worked a little bit with some of the corporate side or some of these bigger contracts with C9 and C9 by Champion and Reebok, and then on the nonprofit side a little. So as some of those experiences came together and still competing as an athlete, I decided to start KO Alliance, where we specifically helped build mutually beneficial relationships within the fitness and wellness space. And now that the consumer is started to question eating and training and lifestyle earlier, it's really gone more to lifestyle than fitness and wellness, which is great because that means I think people are just getting healthier overall, even though that's the opposite of what media tells us. So we really help to get companies that want to come in and yes, if it's company specific and we're looking to build out the brand and help them find their identity, as creative as we are, I say this a lot, we really work to reveal everything that's already there. We think hopefully we're attracting the right, customer at this point, meaning the customers that are coming to KO Alliance that are mission driven. They do have, heart space. It's not really about the potential margin that's there, but they're starting a company because their child had diabetes and they want to start a cleaner product, or they've been in CrossFit for 20 years and they want better grips or something like that. So we really work to get back to like their original identity. What is your why? And then build from there, versus a lot of creative companies will say, all right, this is cool and this is cool. Like, let's put this together and here's your story. We really try and get back to that initial message and then build from that ground point. And usually that's not too long of a process. We just need the right people that really understand it and want to go from there. We're not the company that is, like I say, pop music in the 90s, where you come in and you kind of manufacture the band and you put it together and there's the cute boy and the athletic boy and the rebel, and you put it all together regardless of what it really is. And that can work for some people. That's not us. So our authentic base is to bring in people that are already like minded in that capacity. And then we help build from everything that's already there.
That's really cool. Why don't you walk us through, one of the brands that you've worked with? Like, give us one that we could all relate to and how you've taken them on that journey. Because I'm sure it's like an owner or a small group and, they're entering a space. Like, walk us through one that you've helped.
Sure. So we've had a couple companies that weren't necessarily like, we do a lot with CrossFit still, but they weren't CrossFit brands, but their product was fitting for CrossFit. An example would be like a chalk company we worked with. They were big in the climbing space, or are big in the climbing space. And they saw this opportunity because we use a lot of chalk and CrossFit to activate in that space. So we helped them with their key messaging and made their posters. Obviously, you're not going to have a person rock climbing in a CrossFit gym that's advertising chalk. You'd need someone that's like lifting weights or things like that. So we really, again, we don't change the product, we don't change the mission. We just make it more relatable, more digestible for that specific niche audience. So in that case, the product is exactly the same, and it was phenomenal for CrossFit. And we would just then help with their influencers and helping find, again, mutually beneficial relationships for the long term between influencers, between affiliates, between gyms, and then helping with their key messaging and their marketing materials to speak directly to the niche audience we're working to activate within. And then alongside that, like I said, mission driven, we're very specific there. So we would say, how about, a portion of proceeds for every sale kick back to, a specific CrossFit driven charity, or, events at the end of the year that are charitable. Or we always try and put in, again, some mission driven angle on there. And a lot of times the companies we work with already have something. They already have a 501c they work with, or even some have one in-house, and we try and pack that in with the strategy. Oh, I lost your audio. I can't hear you.
So a lot of these companies started out with already had a particular mission in mind, a specific niche, but you're helping them get that voice, that brand out there in a way that works, right?
Right. And some of them, one of our big accounts last year was Red Bull, and we specifically worked with their 501c3 Wings for Life. And it's a worldwide race that it's really incredible. Worldwide race. And this is right when the pandemic was happening. And ironically, they've got an online version as well, where anyone in the world can participate through their phones, and then you just go out and run, and everybody starts at the same time. It's a super cool initiative. And all the proceeds kick back to spinal cord injury research. And so that was like an established brand and business. And then we worked specifically with their mission driven leg of that. So we are helping them get into specifically the CrossFit community to talk about what this is. Cause I had a couple of really great friends have serious spinal cord injuries. So we activated them as influencers, and we talked about, taking a well-known established brand and like kind of like the X Games space and bring it into CrossFit, because we had spinal cord injury CrossFit. So we can take brands that are already established as well and then help them activate into these niche communities. Again, a little bit similar to the same process, but we're not really rebuilding the whole brand. We're just shifting the way it's focused on.
Gotcha. And do you actually help brands that don't have a voice or starting out kind of find and define that mission and whatnot?
Yeah, we do. And we've done some personal management as well, with just like influencers that are working to build their personal brand. And it's really the same process. We sit down and say like, okay, what is your why? Why are you doing this? What's getting you into this? And again, instead of being creative, we sit there and we do a breakdown of what is already here, what's really already here. And then we can build the brand from the ground up. Everything else, as far as, the brand book, the messaging, the colors, we can build all that easy from there. But that establishing that initial why and what the long-term goals are initially how we help build a voice.
Gotcha. And besides asking like the why behind it, is there a specific set of questions or a framework that works that perhaps a business owner we're working with or someone who's starting their thing out could adopt or think about?
Yeah, we had a list of questions for a while. What's your mission? What's your end game? And that's fine. We still kind of go with that. But really, I just try and get face to face with the lead or the owner or the founder or the creative person and say, just talk to me about the brand. And then usually I'll pull out what I hear, what I think is important, because sometimes they won't think it's important. Like they'll say, here's our margins, here's this, and all this like key data. And I'm just like, why are you doing this? And they're like, oh, well, actually, my son has diabetes and this is why. And I'm like, okay, let's humanize this whole brand and let's lean on to that. So as much as a checklist is great, it's really like, I like to sit down in front of them and just feel the energy and say, tell me about this. Why are we doing this? What's the point? And then I pull out key pieces. And a lot of times they'll be like, oh, we didn't really, do people care about that? Is it a big deal? And that's when again, angle of ours is always humanizing the brand and pulling into that. And not everyone's comfortable with that. So that's, again, we have to find our right client. But really working to show and showcase that why, whether it's about family, personal mission, society, religion, whatever, and then lean into it. Red Bull, for an example, they're doing this, and then I'm like, and obviously it's a lot of conversation around what is the race. It's international. It's we're working specifically with CrossFitters because we've had major spinal cord injuries within the CrossFit space, and how much CrossFit has helped them rehabilitate. So things that Red Bull might not think is important, we do. So the best piece of advice I can give is sit down and just let them talk. Let them say and ask a few questions that probe into that initial why they started the business. And I think that will reveal most of your starting points as far as revealing the authentic voice.
For sure. I've found too, in my experience doing this with our marketing agency, that once you really start asking why, or you get some links out there, whether it's on paper or discussion, like the real answers kind of become apparent, right? Because on the surface, it's just the textbook answers, or they start like talking about the P&L or how this product's going to take off. But it's almost like you got to peel back the onion when you're doing that deep branding work.
Absolutely. And a lot of, my younger, newer clients, I don't know if you guys see this, or my startups, I should say, regardless of age, you're kind of wearing all the hats. So I think you get that because you see how, again, the consumer and the landscape has changed, where my bigger companies, my more traditional ones, which are usually the bigger paychecks, are a little more difficult because they've done things their way forever and it's always worked. The problem is everything's changing. I mean, 2020 and 2021, I've been calling the year of the awakening, because everything is transitioning and everything that worked before, thankfully, doesn't work anymore. And we're having to evolve, particularly in these larger, big food, big pharma, all the things that have had their kind of like OG marketing agencies and whatnot have done it a certain way. It's no longer a thing because the consumer is completely different.
Yeah, it's almost like with the accessibility of information and everybody being able to have their voice, that corporate behemoth model, which perhaps has a place, national or international, getting broken up. And I don't feel like it's like the little brands or smaller companies taking a crack at it. Like that's not their primary mission. It's just people out there want certain products and there's certain niches. And now it seems like there's space for everyone. Yeah.
Absolutely. People always say like, oh, everyone's got a podcast now. There's millions of them. And I'm like, yeah, and there's billions of people. So if my cast isn't a fit for yours, go to somebody else's. And do I have full faith that if your mission is to monetize the cast? I think anybody can. I think there's strategy to that as well. Or maybe it's a supplement to your business, or it's just an outlet for your soul. Who knows? But I don't ever worry about, this is coming from a competitor, about competition or saturation, because there's billions of humans out there. And if you're doing your job right, I have full faith that you will find the right people. And, monetizing it may take a little longer. It may not, depending on how you're going about things. But competition in business from my perspective, should never be a fear.
For sure. And with the proliferation of all the channels of communication, yeah, it's not a problem. Yeah, I agree with you on the podcast. So we've just started ours, episode 7 here. And what we found was we work with some really cool creative people, yourself being one of them. And these conversations were already happening on the side. So we decided to bring them to their audience. And I don't know about you, but I can learn pretty deeply in a podcast. Little nuggets will come up that'll kind of speak to me, even as the host.
Absolutely. And people always ask me, because I strategically have not monetized mine yet. And obviously I hail from that space as far as sponsors and strategic partners and blah, blah, blah. But I really wanted it to be raw. And I actually started the podcast because I saw so many smoke and mirrors in the marketing and branding world, obviously with Instagram and filters and, very simple surface level examples. it's a jungle out there. And we didn't grow up with, social media. So for our young people, they think this is what's real and it's not. And, you and I are on the front lines of kind of the gatekeeper of what's being out there promoted, marketing, branding. And I think there's a responsibility there. So yes, I think it's deeply important to be responsible on the mic. And if your angle is to monetize it, great. But in the meantime, I think it's phenomenal soul fuel for anyone that's a host and that gets to learn and gets to connect with great people like you and hear about their journey and what they're doing. Like, I think there's a major silver lining outside of our own, personal or business intentions with the cast.
For sure. So why don't we transition into that? And this is how we met, actually. We met at a podcasting conference, podmax.co, if you want to check it out, or interested in podcasting. It's a great community. But how did you start this podcast journey? And what's funny is, as you tell us about your podcast, it's actually after a little deeper meaning than just fitness, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I had been on a couple casts and I was like, God, I really think I could do this. And a lot with my clients, I always ask them, to lean back into like their young selves. Like, what were you doing as a kiddo? Like, were you always drawing pictures, or were you out in the sandbox creating, or like, were you a writer or an athlete? Like, what was that? And for me, like when I really reflected back, I had done like little recordings on like holding like recorders and stuff like that. So I think it was kind of like in path. And my name was always on the board for talking like all through school. So it was kind of like, sometimes I think if universe is, I always say universe, God, Madonna, whatever you believe, the universe is telling you where you should be, what you should doing. So I think it was kind of a natural transition. But it's one of the last mediums where you can completely own this and put out whatever you want, whenever you want, however you want to. So I just felt compelled to be like, okay, for maybe all of my influencers that don't want to be influencers, like through my work, my athletics, I was coming across people that had incredible journeys and had overcome incredible things. And they might not have been the person that's, naked on Instagram with millions of followers and all this. There was such value in the story. So I was like, instead of convincing them to be influencers and put their message out, I'm like, I'm just going to start this cast highlighting what I call my varsity humans and having them share their journey, and then they can share the journey and walk away and never have to worry about it. And that's kind of just like how it started. And, I love my consulting business. I will keep it forever. But I'm intentional at this point to have the podcast be the thing, because in my heart, I know this is my most purposeful and useful way to give back to this world, to be of use. Did that even answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. And then give us a little mission of the podcast, because you said it pretty well on the website. You're after these certain types of conversations, right?
Yeah, I think with podcasts, the nichier the better, like as dialed in as you want to be. Like people that knit blue cat sweaters is like ideal. And ours is a little more ambiguous. We talk about graceful disruption. We say questioning a better way, when gracefully disruptive conversation at a time. So in a nutshell, it's really just about challenging status quo from, our young people in high school, like how you're supposed to look in the influencer world and fitness and wellness. Like, yes, maybe somebody has abs, but perhaps that's alongside an eating disorder, or maybe the kid in the back of the class is, training to go to NASA and they're super smart and you had no idea. So it's just about disrupting your own ideologies in your mind. And you see how much marketing and branding and Instagram and all this has created our reality of what's real, instead of, again, kind of like getting back to the brand authenticity, what you actually want to be doing or how you actually feel about things, regardless of what society is telling you to feel about them. And so we try and highlight people that have questioned that better way. So there's examples of being like, oh, okay, well, she's not married and she doesn't have kids. Maybe that's okay. Or, maybe they got married at 18 and that's okay. So we just wanted to disrupt everything around status quo, because in general, I think people need to relax and get happier, because there's probably a lot more right going on in their lives than they think.
Yeah, that's really cool. And also, it sounds like instead of trying to, in young people for sure, and we all dealt with this growing up, right? We had to have a certain jacket, or, we were like a thespian, an athlete, and a jock. So it's almost like when we copy something, we lose a little congruence with what we truly value, right? And perhaps it's not, we haven't even discovered our values to be able to express them. But is that part of it, like getting off that sheen and actually getting you out there, which is aligned with the you inside?
Absolutely. It's definitely pulled me from my comfort zone. And what's cool is when you ask about brands, how you sit down and you have to dig for that authentic space and reveal what's already there versus create. Well, I think if we have young people doing that early on, my conversations with businesses are going to completely change, because they will already be operating from authentic space at 18 versus 40. So it's ironic that it's it's Turmeric and Tequila. It's a juxtaposition of all things. I've got companies on one side where we're helping them reveal what's already there, and then we've got kiddos and or young people or anyone questioning a better way on the other side, working to just personally dive into what they have so they can get to business, professional, relationship space where they're already in absolute authentic situation. But yes, to answer your question, I knew if I was going to start this cast, I would have to be open and vulnerable as well to meet my guests where they were at. So it's been a journey for me to be like, okay, is that the truth? Is this how we feel? Is this what's going on? So it's a very intense through line of me being equally as vulnerable.
That's really cool. So out of doing like getting other people's stories out there, you've been able to have a medium that's forced you to do the work yourself in a healthy way.
Absolutely. Yeah. And I don't know if you stress this at all. Like, we know, like, it's not just out there and it's live right now, but this stays in the world forever. So, I mean, it's out there.
For sure. That's really cool. Let's transition to our third and final part. We'll do a little rapid fire round at the very end. But yeah, so you did some pretty serious CrossFit competition for over a decade. Why don't you just brag on yourself a little bit and tell us how you got into the world and some of the highs and lows? I'm curious, you've mentioned spinal cord injuries multiple times. So like, how do those happen, for example?
Yeah, it's CrossFit. I have nothing but great things to say, and I'm so thankful to have played sports, and I'm such an advocate for our young humans to foster life skills through sports because it was such a major piece of my puzzle and just learning those life skills. So regardless of how competitive you get, you learn teamwork, getting along with other people, time management, and everything you need to get into like the workforce or college or whatever. Like all these skills can happen really early if you're a part of it. So I'm really grateful that like lacrosse and CrossFit have brought also some of the best humans in the world into my life. And they're some of my best friends and family and, you know, all these things to this point. So outside of the competition, the real gift has been the people that it's brought into my world and continues to do so. It's pretty awesome. And both things, I think all fitness or anything you do, you mentioned theater and thespians or piano or whatever music, anytime you have that common ground with someone, it's such an awesome filter for you to find like-minded people, regardless of what the situation is. You can just go to, you know, music hall, play music, like you're going to find other people like you. And I think all those things are such great filters to find really great people to supplement your life and your well-being. But yes, dove into CrossFit got out of college, chilled for a few years, and then got into CrossFit around 2008. By 2009, we were at the games, and this is really when CrossFit was just taking off.
I was about to say, it was blowing up, wasn't it? I mean, not that it doesn't exist now, but it was like the rage.
It was just starting to catch fire. I have two brothers that are in the military, one retired, but one of them was like, you and Todd, my other brother, need to go try this. And the bug just bit, and we got in, and we actually competed at the farm in 2009, like the OG space. And then 2010, it was Sub Hut Center at the time. We competed 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. I went back to competing as an individual. So I tried to compete as an individual, and I was always about one or so spots away. And it was super competitive back then, but it's really competitive now. Like you need to train as like a full-time athlete if you want to go to the games. So I had the pleasure of competing on the team when I didn't make it as an individual. In 2011, we actually got silver. We got second place at the games for the affiliate cup. So that was super special. My dad was competing, and he's I think a 3 or 4 time Masters champion. So he was out there with us. But it was awesome. And at this point, you know, I say business is the new fitness. I'm more focused on my business and the podcast, but today I just got home from the gym and trained with my dad. So it's still very much a part of my life.
That's really cool. CrossFit, you know, the injuries come up a bit. So tell us about that. And you mentioned spinal cord injuries a ton. Like, how does it happen? And it can get pretty bad when you're throwing around some significant weight, right?
Yeah, well, I like anything. I think CrossFit does get a bad rap unnecessarily. So we were competing, so we knew we were overtraining, and I had torn my ACL in college from lacrosse. So I would never say don't play lacrosse because you might tear your ACL. Thing is, I mean, things happen. You can get, you can trip walking your dog and have a serious injury. So you can't not live life. And CrossFit, I think, does far more good than it does harm. You just need to have a good coach and be responsible for yourself. Know when your body needs a break. But we were training to compete, so we knew we were overtraining. We were beating stuff up, and my life motto is kind of, you work hard, you play harder, and then you figure out you can kind of rest when you're dead, and that's it. I'm not saving anything to be 80 years old and rocking on a rocking chair in the sun. We can just see how it goes. But yes, there has been some serious injuries. One of my really good friends that I started CrossFit with, Kevin Ogar, had a freak accident where he actually dropped I don't know how much weight it was, but a barbell behind him, and there happened to be bumper plates that shouldn't have been there, that it bounced off those bumper plates and came back at his behind him, bounced back at his back and severed his spine. So and then I have another friend, actually Amy Van Dyken. She's one of the most successful female Olympic athletes in swimming. She had an ATV accident, but CrossFit actually helped her rehab and get back to where she is right now. So they're both paralyzed from the legs down, and we actually did a bunch around our Wings for Life with Red Bull last year with them. So it's kind of cool to see worlds collide. But I think if you're paying attention, all things are connected. But some of these injuries, while they can happen in CrossFit has actually supplemented a lot of training and rehabilitation avenues for serious injuries. So there's adaptive CrossFit now. There's all angles that have come off it. But like all sports, I would always dial it back into personal responsibility, knowing your body, knowing when to pull back, knowing when to go harder, and knowing when to and how to find proper coaching.
For sure. And with, like you said, any kind of sport or training, there's risk. I mean, heck, there's risk when you get in the car. Anything's possible, and no one gets out alive. Yes. All right, we're going to move into the rapid fire round here and fire off a few questions. Are you ready?
Well, let's do it.
What is a book that everyone should read?
Shout out to Andrew Kapp. I actually had him on my podcast. It's the Last Law of Attraction book you'll ever need. It's amazing. I'm doing the daily practices. I think I was born in the 80s, so I think it was the 90s when The Secret came out. So I was always super interested into the law of attraction. And I'm just getting back into, I've always been more spiritual than religious, but getting back into intention, affirmations, my morning routine. I'm way more of a creative than a structured human. So now that I'm, in the 40s and we're getting more serious about things, I'm also a Libra, so I'm a late bloomer on some stuff. But the morning rituals, affirmations, law of attraction, your energy, 2021 there's no better time now to take charge of your own life. And I think that's an awesome, really easy read that's very straightforward, and he's doing phenomenal things. So last book of law of attraction you'll ever need.
We'll have to link to that in the show notes. Yeah. Okay, outside of CrossFit, what are some of your favorite hobbies or things to do to kind of unwind and sharpen the saw outside of work and the grind?
Yeah, I have 3 rescue dogs, and they are my world. Cleo is going to be 6, my first one. I had her for 4 years 4 or 5 years by herself, and then I got another one, Colette. She's going to be 2 this summer, and then she's a cattle dog and has all the energy. So I got a third one, which I know sounds crazy, but it's actually easier with them being companion hellions. And he's 6 months, actually, a few days ago. So my 3 dogs, I take them, we do hikes, we do stuff. Colorado, obviously, our weather's turning. So to get outside and just get with them, I was very social. I love my fellow humans. And then to get away and just be like in nature with animals is amazing. So they're a major piece. The CrossFit training, I get to see my dad. That's awesome. Every day we have a really great training crew right now at Palladium CrossFit. Shout out to them. And then the social times, the other stuff, my friends, like, having a little tequila, sipping in the sun, like just disconnecting and from the workspace and just being with the social space.
For sure. And last question, the Turmeric and Tequila podcast, how did you come up with a name for that?
This was the easiest branding venture in my life. I didn't even know if it would stick because I didn't know if people knew turmeric. Thankfully, in the consumer packaged good world, turmeric has taken off. But it was me. It was a juxtaposition of me kind of battling, like, I'm an athlete, I'm a CrossFitter, and people are telling me you need to weigh your food and not party and all this. And I didn't want to do that. And so it was the juxtaposition of, like, an anti-inflammatory and then an inflammatory, and finding that balance of being all things. I think we are fascinating, multifaceted humans, and we don't need to be in these boxes that society says we need to. And I think that in itself is stressful and cancerous. You just got to relax and you be both things and just be what it is. And that's enough. All right, it's muted again.
You're watching out for me.
I got you.
Yeah, you do. If people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach you?
Sure. I think I sound like a wannabe millennial here, but probably Instagram. You can shoot us a DM or me. Our website is turmericandtequila.com, KOalliance.com. Everything is Instagram, Turmeric Tequila. My personal one is Madonna's Hero. I'm a huge Madonna fan. And then if you find any one of these, you can find the rest of them. So I stay as connected to the social media as much as possible. So we're accessible for sure.
That's awesome. Well, Kristen, thanks so much for sharing your expertise on branding and your journey on the podcast and being an entrepreneur. So all our information will be in the show notes. And thanks for being part of episode 7 on the Create With Us podcast.
Yes, thank you so much, and I got to say a shout out to you and Creative Studios, how you guys have embraced our website. We're excited to do more projects with you guys, but the way you operate from heart space and goodwill is to be noticed. So I really want to throw a gold star there because I think what you guys are doing really special and are on the forefront of even changing that industry. So shout out to that.
Yeah, we appreciate the kind words.
Yes.
All right, until next time, that is a wrap on this podcast. We'll see you later.
Thanks, Jeff.